Trump meets with Polish president at White House discuss war in Ukraine. Tonight we witness a moment that is both symbolic and deeply consequential. A meeting that echoes through the halls of power in Washington and reverberates across the capitals of Europe. The White House has become the stage for a diplomatic encounter that carries with it not only the weight of politics, but the gravity of war, survival, and the uncertain fate of millions. Donald Trump, a figure who never steps into the spotlight quietly, has welcomed the President of Poland into the Oval Office, and together they stand on the fault line of the greatest European conflict since World War II. This is not merely a handshake across a polished desk, not simply the exchange of polite words and diplomatic courtesies. It is a meeting born of urgency, defined by the bloodshed in Ukraine, framed by the relentless advance of Russian forces, and underscored by the growing anxiety of NATO allies who know that the war has already redrawn the map of Europe and may yet redraw the future of the world order. Trump, never one to downplay his role in global affairs, presents himself as the indispensable dealmaker, the man who insists he can end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, the man who believes strength is the language tyrants respect. But across from him sits the Polish president, who carries the burden of a nation that has stood as the gateway to Ukraine, a frontline supporter, a neighbor that has absorbed millions of refugees, and a state that knows the weight of history all too well. Poland has been the launchpad for aid, weapons, and political solidarity, but it also knows that a misstep in Washington, a failure in NATO unity, or a wavering of American commitment could bring the chaos of war to its own borders. The conversation at the White House is more than a meeting of two leaders. It is a clash of perspectives, shaped by differing political ambitions, domestic pressures, and visions of what victory in Ukraine should mean. Trump approaches the conflict with his trademark bravado, hinting at secret plans, at bold strokes of diplomacy that no one else dares attempt, yet without revealing the hard details that would prove whether such promises are realistic or mere showmanship. The Polish president, on the other hand, must navigate carefully, balancing the gratitude for American support with the fear that Trump's words could mean a pivot away from Europe's most urgent fight. He knows Poland cannot afford hesitation. He knows that if Ukraine falls, the shadow of Moscow will stretch across Eastern Europe once again. Inside the Oval Office, the cameras capture only the public gestures, the firm handshake, the practiced smiles, the flags standing tall behind them. But the real drama unfolds in the closed-door discussions, where the Polish delegation presses for assurances, for commitments, for the kind of military and financial backing that Ukraine desperately needs to survive. Trump listens, nods, interrupts, waves his hand dismissively at times, and leans in at others. The rhythm of the exchange reveals the stakes. This is not diplomacy for appearances, it is diplomacy for survival. The war in Ukraine has reached a critical juncture. Russian offensives grind forward, villages are reduced to rubble, and the human cost mounts daily. Western support has been strong but fragmented, and fatigue has begun to creep into the political discourse on both sides of the Atlantic. Some, in the United States, question the billions in aid, wondering aloud how long America can continue to shoulder the burden. But Poland, with its deep memory of oppression, with its borders pressed against the very front line of European security, does not have the luxury of distance. To Poland, this is not a foreign war. It is a defense of its own sovereignty, its own independence, its own right to live free of Russian domination. Trump senses the urgency but also sees the political opportunity. He knows that every word spoken today will be parsed not only in Warsaw and Kiev, but in Moscow, in Brussels, in Berlin, and most of all, in the battleground states of the United States, where foreign policy often collides with domestic discontent. For Trump, the meeting is a stage on which he can project authority, demonstrate statesmanship, and draw a sharp contrast with his opponents who, in his telling, have bungled the war, weakened NATO, and risked plunging America into endless conflict. He insists that under his leadership, the war would never have begun, that Putin would never have dared, that America's strength would have been enough to keep the peace. The Polish president listens, perhaps skeptical, perhaps hopeful, but knowing that what matters most is not speculation about what could have been, but action in the here and now. The war has forced Poland into a role it neither sought nor can avoid, the linchpin of NATO's eastern flank. And in Washington, the Polish president's words carry the urgency of someone who speaks not from theory, but from proximity, from vulnerability, from the knowledge that a single miscalculation could mean missiles raining down on Polish soil. Trump, for all his boldness, must recognize this reality. The meeting is an exchange between ambition and necessity, between political calculation and existential fear. And yet beneath the official statements and the carefully prepared talking points, there is a deeper undercurrent, a recognition that Ukraine's fate will shape the trajectory of Europe for generations. If Ukraine holds, if it pushes back, if it survives as a sovereign democracy, then NATO will emerge stronger, the West more united, and Russia contained. But if Ukraine falls, if support wavers, if Trump or any future American leader decides the cost is too high, then the consequences will ripple outward with devastating force. Poland knows this. The Polish president carries that knowledge into the room. And whether Trump fully embraces it or not, history will judge this meeting not by its optics, but by its outcomes. As the press pool shouts questions in the Rose Garden, as both leaders issue their public remarks, there is a performance of unity, of shared purpose, of determination to stand with Ukraine. But behind the rhetoric lies the tension that defines this moment. Will America's resolve hold firm, or will the winds of political change alter the course of history? Trump's meeting with the Polish president is more than a diplomatic event. It is a test, a glimpse into the battles not only being fought on the fields of Ukraine, but in the corridors of Washington and the hearts of nations around the world. The images will circulate, the handshake, the nods of agreement, the flags waving, in symmetry. But what truly matters is the substance, the hard questions raised, the answers left unsaid, and the commitments, or lack thereof, that will define the future of Ukraine, Poland, and the entire transatlantic alliance. Trump meets with the Polish president at the White House, and in that meeting, the war in Ukraine finds its echo in the world's most powerful office. And as history records these hours, the world waits to see not only what was promised, but what will actually be delivered.